Welcome to Mr. Brown's Basement, a channel devoted to sharing the craft of repairing, restoring, and modifying vintage electronic gear, and other random stuff.
This video is about the Sony 8301W TV from about 1961. I don't know how popular this set was at the time, but I'm assuming it was because there still seem to be a lot of these sets coming up for sale online now 60 plus years later. First, some background. The 8301 was a revolutionary piece of technology at the time. There were plenty of black and white TVs on the market in 1961, including miniature-ish TVs, but nearly all of them used power-hungry vacuum tubes in their design. This was one of the few that didn't. Incidentally, the 110-volt North American version was known as the 8301W. The 220-volt version of the set, sold in Europe, was the 8301E. Sony advertised the set as the world's lightest, direct-view, all-transistorized, personal, truly portable TV. That's a mouthful and a stretch of the facts. I think they wanted people to believe that it was the world's first solid-state TV. It wasn't. That distinction belongs to the Philco Safari H2010 that came out in 1959. I don't have a Philco Safari to show you yet. Sony chose their words carefully. They called their 8301 the world's first direct-view all-transistor TV. This was to contrast it with the Safari. In that TV, the picture tube was mounted vertically in the cabinet and had to be viewed indirectly using a mirror, hence Sony's direct-view qualification. Sony also claimed it was all-transistor. The term all-transistor was meant to suggest it was solid-state, that is, completely without vacuum tubes. But Sony was being very, very literal. It was all-transistor, but it wasn't without tubes. First, they didn't count the picture tube as a vacuum tube, which it most certainly is. But I can forgive them for that. Flat panel TVs without picture tubes weren't possible until the early 1980s. However, Sony quietly skirted the fact that their all-transistor set actually had two tubes in it, a pair of 1 DK1 tubes to rectify the 7.5 kilovolts for the picture tube. I wonder why they didn't use solid-state rectifiers. Probably cost. And at only 13.5 pounds, it was indeed lighter than Philco's 15.5 pound set. But calling it truly portable was playing loose and easy with the truth. The 8301 could not be run off batteries without an external battery pack, sold separately. The Philco Safari had batteries inside it. From what I've read about the Safari, the screen wasn't very bright, and that's not surprising with the 2-inch CRT. The 8301 had an 8.5-inch CRT, which wouldn't be a problem. But aside from the marketing, the 8301 had design innovations that Sony would use later on with their extremely popular battery-operated TVs like the 4203W. Sony used a series of stackable printed circuits, which I'll show you a little later on. I must confess, I opened up this TV when I acquired it. I bought it off eBay, and even though the seller promised to pack it well, par for the course, he didn't. There was granular material in the box. I was concerned that the CRT might have been fractured. After opening it though, no physical damage was found to the tube. The cabinet, however, was warped, making it especially difficult to separate and rejoin the case halves. Except for the warpage, which was mostly at the bottom. It's in relatively good shape, a few scratches here. There's a lot of grit underneath the glass, which sort of sucks because you have to take out the picture tube to clean that out. This, by the way, is adjustable for the real retro look. I'm lucky that the volume control knob and the channel selector knob are not lost. Having to source either one is difficult. You might wonder about these two holes here. They're not exactly attractive. Those are for adjustments. It has the frequently used picture adjusting controls right here. I noticed a few screws were missing. And the antenna is broken. And if you think that you can reorder that part, no, you can't. To repair the antenna, I have to find another telescoping antenna of approximately the same outer diameter and find a way to make it look convincingly original, at least to the uninitiated. The original antenna was articulated, but being able to reproduce that is unlikely. Some of this trim is actually broken. You can't see it, but it is not perfect. On the back, there is a power plug for AC or DC. There is this huge power plug for a rechargeable battery pack, which I don't have. This is the 300 ohm VHF antenna plug and the 75 ohm VHF antenna plug for channels 2 through 13. Where's the UHF antenna plug for channels 14 through 83? There isn't one, because this TV doesn't have a UHF tuner. The handle on top is in good condition. It's not cosmetic. It couldn't be for a 13-pound set. And the speaker, though dented over there, is on the bottom. If you're considering getting one of these sets, make sure that it has most of its fittings. If it doesn't, you're going to have difficulty sourcing them, or you'll have to make them somehow. The TV was sold as is, so I have no idea how well it works, or if it works at all. Let's get it opened up and clean out 60 plus years of dust before powering it up. The visor comes off with a single nut. It's important to protect the safety plastic panel from scratches. Use foam or a thick blanket. Remove the Phillips screws on the back. The one that holds in the antenna terminal board will spin because there's a nut on the other side. Don't worry about that one. Remove the two flathead screws on the left and right. They hold in the decorative chrome rails that grip the front of the set. Each rail has a projection that fits into a hole on the side. One of mine is broken, and I'll try to mend it later on with crazy glue. There should be screws hidden under each rail near the front. Mine were missing. Remove one screw on the bottom of the set. Only the rearmost screw needs to be removed. Remove the four small knobs, the volume control knob and the channel/fine-tuning knob. They pull out straight without set screws. Finally, start prying the two case halves open little by little. Don't be aggressive. You may scratch or deform the cabinet. My TV's cabinet is badly warped out of shape at the bottom. It took about 15 minutes to gradually work the two case halves apart. Later on, I will try to straighten out the bottom to make reassembly a little easier. But even if your TV's case cabinet is perfect, it will still be a tight fit. All right. And a piece of insulating material. Okay, I don't know what all this black stuff is. This is dirty. It's filthy, actually. In fact, all this is going to have to be blown out. A ton of electrolytics. There are two of the adjustments accessible through the holes on the top. There's a third adjustment which is not accessible. If a lot of weight is placed on the case, the metal foot on the bottom will cause the bottom of the case to be bent out of shape. I think that's what happened to this TV. I took the chassis outside and used a handheld blower and soft paintbrush to loosen and remove the dust. Removing dust improves ventilation and allows components to run cooler, extending their lives. I removed the low voltage fuse and it's intact, but it's broken. I will have to replace this fuse at the very least. I've decided to inject power into the set using my bench power supply set at 12 volts and current limited at 1 amp. The spot I've chosen is at capacitor C2, which is a 2000 microfarad electrolytic connected to the output of the full wave bridge. The set will think it's receiving 117 volts AC. The only components I'm not checking this way are the switch, fuse, bridge rectifier, and power transformer. Guess what? We have a raster. Wow. There's a darkened region here, and I'm wondering if it's dirt or perhaps a misaligned ion trap, though I don't even know if this set uses an ion trap. Nope, no ion trap. Maybe a slightly worn tube, or maybe it wasn't functioning at some point and somebody allowed the middle of the CRT to get burned. Not terrible. It's somewhat visible. Maybe it's dirt. Hard to say. One strange thing I've noticed after poking around a bit, the pilot light is a neon glow lamp, which can't possibly be the pilot light indicated on the schematic. And the charge lamp, which is incandescent, isn't on the diagram at all. Let's try it with a video source and see what happens. Not a bad picture. I've had to adjust the contrast. And it seems to want a fair-sized signal. What's weird about this set is that the controls over here are vertical and horizontal hold, brightness, and gain. The designers chose to control the contrast by attenuating the signal to the tuner and adjusting the gain in the IF stages. It does work to some degree, but I still needed to access the contrast control to get a decent picture. The only thing I want to do with this set right now is take it out of the cabinet and clean the faceplate. It's got bits inside and the bits are interfering with the picture. Maybe this mask around the screen was damaged, but whatever it is, it's got to go. And also do something with the antenna. What I'm thinking of is maybe a new antenna inside this. I've knocked the piece inside so that it's loose. It can't come out of here because this has been crimped. But if I open this up, in the very worst case, saw it off, stick in a new antenna, hopefully I have one which is small enough to fit in there, and then crimp it back, it might do the trick. It's amazing what you can do with a screwdriver, or a pair of pliers. And this is the remains of the original antenna. That's it. Let's see what I've got. Yeah, I'll probably use some copper wire and solder it at that end. And here, it's a little bit smaller than it ought to be. Put a large safety tip on the end so there's something to grab and that it can't disappear into this tube. It can stick out exactly that much before I run out of space. I think I can do something with that. I've run a copper wire, guess maybe 18 gauge, through that loop at the bottom of the antenna, and with any luck at all I can solder the ends. I wanted more of a Hershey's Kiss, and what I got was more of a pancake. But that's okay, because it will fulfill its purpose. It will not let the end of the antenna fall into the tube, but I would have to paint it red. I'm also going to clean out this case, as it's sort of grubby inside and certainly on the outside. I'm hoping I can remove the front escutcheon, that is this thing. It looks like it's held in by a whole bunch of screws. For whatever reason, they've got different kinds of screws, flathead and Phillips or JIS. The picture tube socket does slide off, and it is indexed, so it's easy to get it on the right way. I've made a mark on the socket so I know exactly where the index is, right there. The yoke is thankfully unplugged by removing these slide connectors from the front board. I'll have to make a map to make sure they go on the same way, otherwise the picture could be flipped either horizontally or vertically, and I don't want that. Here we are with the chassis pulled off the escutcheon section, a very dusty yoke and dusty picture tube, a anode button connector. Yes, I discharged it just to be sure that I wasn't going to be electrocuted. I have a video about discharging the anode connector of picture tubes. While we're here, a quick look around shows some really old diodes and some very old electrolytic capacitors. It's a wonder they're still working. What I don't see, at least not yet, are the high voltage rectifiers. Oh wait, yes I do. These silver things here, those are actually a pair of high voltage rectifier tubes. I thought for a moment they were just film capacitors. Now I can pull out these flathead screws which hold in the grounding strip here and clamps for the picture tube. Clean it up, put it back together. I think I know what was disintegrating now. These are pads between these clamps and the picture tube. Look how distorted these are. Something, even electrical tape, would be better than this. They're extremely brittle and not doing much padding at all. Maybe even silicone pads. Something is needed. That's exactly the problem. It's the rubber gasket around the picture tube which is falling apart and creating crumbly bits that are falling between the picture tube face and the safety glass. I thought I could salvage that black gasket around the picture tube, but no, because the act of removing the picture tube deformed it enough that it could not be reformed. I've left a little bit inside. For the most part it's gone, which unfortunately means there's no padding between the case and the picture tube. I don't know what could be done. There is a space. Would have been nice to fill it with some sort of padding. For the padding on the clamps, I've put on some silicone feet, these things, which will pad it and prevent it from moving. And they certainly give more padding than what was there before. I've got the TV back together, mostly. The safety glass is a little bit loose. Nothing that can be done about that because the gasket is toast. But the picture tube is not going anywhere. I've cleaned up this case as best I can and removed some of the rust over here, which was making it hard to get the case apart and together. The case is just drying, and so is the antenna. It's got a new antenna, it's got a clean screen, the body is cleaned up and repaired and unbent. This is a TV I've always wanted to get my hands on, not just because it was the world's lightest direct-view all-transistorized personal truly portable TV, but because I like the retro aesthetic. Or maybe I wanted to watch what Santa watched. Hope you enjoyed this video from Mr. Brown's Basement. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more interesting and unusual videos.